Welcome to Great Northern Cascade Division. In N-scale, the eagle light amongst you might be able to see some trends that are kind of hanging out. I have all of the track work done for King Street Station, or at least I have it all cut, set in place, wired up, turnouts are all done, and I can move trains in and out of all four platforms now. None of the track work is actually glued down in place. It's going to be a little bit too much of a pain to do, and I'm kind of out of time before I'm going to have to shut down for the summer with surgery coming up tomorrow. But at least now I have all this track work done. I'm at about 75 to 80 feet or so of track, all cut in place, all wired up into the DCC bus. It is kind of cool because the Digitrack system I already have hooked into JMRI. I can do a whole bunch of fun train control through there. So I think now, like I say, I need to rest up after surgery, and I might do some playing around with JMRI rosters of locomotives. I might do some configuration of sound decoders, so rather than just having function numbers, I can have function names as to what they all do. Speed matching of locos, fun little things like that that you don't really want to sit down and spend a bunch of time doing as opposed to working on the layout, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So sitting down in front of a computer might be about the limit of it. So please do like, subscribe, and follow along. Hit the notification bell so that when I am able to come up with some videos later on in the summer, you can keep track of those. And let me know what you think of this. I think it's a pretty cool milestone. It's actually going to be right around a year since I did the first video at some point in June, I think end of June. Although the actual bench work and stuff itself really didn't get started until the beginning of August. But right before the year mark, I suppose, I do finally now have track down. I can now actually run trains for real down here on the actual layout, all wired up, and back through JMRI and control off engine driver on a smartphone, along with the radio throttle from Digitrack. So take care of yourselves, enjoy your summer. I'll be back whenever I can, and yeah, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Probably gonna be leaving. How much work have you got? Have you got any OT on your train? We're all fixed up and ready to go. I don't know if he'll be able to come out or not, but that's all I got today. Okay. I'll let you get right. Mission take reverse moving yard over. Roger. Okay, reverse.
Alright, so one thing that I've been doing before I start actually putting any track down on the layout is going through and checking that my turnouts are all correct and ready to roll. So the NMRA, National Model Railroad Association, makes these gauges, and they have basically a whole bunch of different measurement options that are kind of built into them. It's a little bit pricey for what it is. It's like $20 or $25, but it has things like you can make sure that the gauge for the track is correct, and so you basically just put it between the rails, apply a little bit of sideward pressure, and make sure that everything fits. There's also one to make sure that the distance between the rails is correct there as the turnout actually throws, so that it's going to be able to conduct electricity properly and then generate it through. You can check the flange ways and things like that. The most unreliable piece, not necessarily unreliable, but the piece that's most likely to cause problems on your layout is almost certainly turnouts. If they're slightly out of gauge, if you're not feeding power correctly to them, and things like that. So I always just like to check and make sure that these are correct before they're in place. Now, one thing that we'll get into when we start putting it down actually on the layout, I won't attach these to the subrub bed. I won't glue them, use any kind of adhesive on these. The adjoining tracks, that all the 3 track lengths around them will all be glued in place. I typically don't actually glue the turnouts. One, it's to make sure that I don't get any amount of glue around here. on the throw bar, where that's going to kind of gum things up. The other part is that if this does fail for some reason, or if I decide I want to add more feeder wires, then all I just have to do is slide the rail joiners out of the way, and then the whole turnout will lift out. Okay. So, in terms of power on the back of the Atlas Code 55, well, blister pack, they do kind of give an indication of how you can solder it. And in theory, it's actually pretty easy on these ones compared to some of the other Pico turnouts that I've used in 00 and HO scale gauge. And so, they have a solder connection point that will power the frog, and then really all you need to do is apply power to the actual two outside rails. And in theory, that's what they say you need to do, because they already have little feeders that are jumping between a whole bunch of different points on the turnout, no pun intended. And so some people, don't necessarily trust these. They worry that they could fail, and so, okay, if I only apply power to the outside rail, and then I'm relying on this little feeder, then am I guaranteed that I'm always going to have power in here? Or if I apply power to this rail, then do I trust this feeder so that I'm going to have power to here? The other point is that you are going to have rail joiners on here that will connect to the other lengths of track that will also be supplying power. So the only main one that I would be a little bit concerned about would be in here. But one thing that I do to test, just to make sure before I go ahead and put these on the layout, I have a little multimeter, and all it's doing is just checking that I can go through. So you probably can't hear it, but you should be able to see on the display. Just make sure that I do have it going through all the way. But now if I touch this rail, for example, nothing should happen, because that's not where I actually want power to go. I should have power all the way through on that top rail, and then the same here, which is giving me the indication that I guess this jumper is working correctly. There we go. And then let's see, camera's kind of in my view, so I should have here, and so then I should also be jumping power through to that. Kind of tricky to get in. There we go. So maybe it's a little bit hard to see on the screen. It's a little bit hard to see with the camera in the way. I have already gone through and checked this one. And so again, all I'm wanting to do is make sure that my jumpers are actually carrying the power through correctly where I want them to, and that I'm not going to get power showing up in completely the wrong place. And so again, some people go through and they add their own jumpers on these. It's one way I'm not really going to bother. It's kind of a lot of work with the number of turnouts that I would have to do. I kind of trust these. I find it ironic that some people say, don't cut out a little piece of the bottom of the sleeper and wire directly, and just, create feeders that are based off the rail joiners. It's like, oh, you trust rail joiners to conduct electricity across your layout, but you won't trust these little feeders on your turnouts. So different people have different tolerances for risk, I suppose, and for some people this isn't a big deal and we'll go ahead and do it. Soldering's not something that I dislike, but it's also not something that I'm going to waste a bunch of time on. So I'm going to trust that these little feeders will work. And so then for the layout, like I said, all we need to do is solder in the two outside rails, and then we're also going to have one, can't quite see, there we go, this is the one right here that Atlas used to then supply power into the frog. And you have to figure out how you're going to provide that power. So typically from the turnout motor, or you would have your own toggle switch that will then flip the polarity. Usually you use a turnout motor that provides the right polarity. So it's just one wire into the frog, and then depending on which way the turnout gets thrown, the polarity that you send out changes to make sure that the frog's correct. You don't have to do that. You can leave it completely. And if we just turn it back over again, we do have quite a distance here where you don't have anything powered, and so basically what it means is that all the other parts of the turnout will be live, just from wiring the two outside rails because of the feeders underneath, but this frog in the middle wouldn't be. It's an insulated frog, and so you have to provide power to it. If you don't, like I say, it's quite a distance for the train to go. Depending on what loco you have, it might be fine. Most modern locos are multi-wheel pickup, and so I'm actually pretty sure that even without wiring up the frog for now, I'm pretty sure that almost all my locos will make it through here without stalling. We'll soon find out, because I don't actually have any I don't actually have any turnout motors that are going to be able to provide that frog power. I will wire it such that I will be able to do it in the future, but I'm pretty sure all my locos will make it through here without stalling. If you have some short 4-axle locos, if you have some older locos that don't have multi-wheel pickup, then you might have a little bit more of a problem, and you might want to really look at providing power to that frog. If you have different types of turnouts that don't have this isolated frog, then again, maybe you need to think about that. I think this is where I had to double check that on my old layout with code 100 turnouts in 00HL scale. We ended up putting in insulated rail joiners here because it was actually this whole section that was powered by the frog. There was no cutout here. So in theory, if you wanted to, you could, again, trust that the jumpers here are going to feed the power. You also have rail joins that are feeding the power, so you only have this isolated section. On some different types of turnouts, it might be this whole rail that comes through in the frog, in which case you would be putting in insulated rail joiners. You don't need to with these Code 55 Atlas turnouts because you have that isolation point. So, don't take this as word. It might vary depending on what different type of turnouts that you have, what scale you're working in, things like that. So again, look on the back of the pack, or sometimes there's a little one-pager that explains what's going on and how you would solder it in. But functionally, you just need to make sure that everything is engaged correctly, so that you're not going to have too many problems, that the actual throw bar moves freely. Figure out how you have isolation on the frog, if you have isolation on the frog, and all these different things will help guide you as to how you're going to plan out installing these, where the feeder wires are going to be, and how you're actually then going to get it soldered. Okay. Alright, so as I'm at the point of starting out with these turnouts, one kind of an interesting / annoying thing that I've noticed on one of my turnouts, I don't know how well it comes across in the video, is the turnout itself has a slight bend to it. It's not super noticeable, but in N scale everything will be. So it's on a flat section, and so if we bring it over to where it would actually sit in place, and there might be a very slight dip here because unfortunately it's sitting right over a join. But if we put some kind of wet on top, and so this is just a steel ruler, what we'll see, and again, I don't know how well it comes across on the camera, is that there is a slight gap between the rails, enough that I can get some styrene just underneath it there. And it's about the height of a sleeper. I think that this was 0.20th of an inch styrene, 0.020, sorry. And so I think what I'm going to do is just fabricate some quick sleep sections to go underneath on various different heights of styrene, just so that we keep a flat surface. I don't want the weight of the locos coming over this to cause any kind of problems. All the other turnouts are fine. If we look at the other turnout on the back there, the profile and all the other turnouts, it's fine. But for whatever reason, this one, a combination of it being slightly bowed anyway, and then the slight dip right over the joint of the plywood sub-road bed, I just want to make sure that raise this just enough so that it has enough support there. But again, this is the kind of thing that you want to be checking. HO, 00, not as big of a deal. And scale, these small tolerances do make a difference in terms of reliably running. On straight sections, I'm less concerned, but again, turnouts are where you typically are going to have problems if you have a loco that's dipping a little bit and it's trying to come through the actual turnout itself. Then it might not get through the flange wires properly, or if it's twisting ever so slightly from side to side, it might just be enough to cause a problem. So it's worth taking the time now to make sure this is correct, and once it's ballasted you won't notice it anyway. But yeah, just check and make sure that as the turnouts are going in, they are sitting flush, they're sitting level, there's not any kind of twisting on them. Anything that you can do to try and make them run as reliably as possible. Not sure how well it's going to come out on the GoPro. It doesn't like focusing in on things really close up, but there are now very thin strips of styrene, 2 or 3 different heights just to get the profile correct. And so now with that steel rule on top to create everything level, it's taken away that flex, it's given that additional support, so as the locos go over it, should be fine. So like I said, kind of weird. All the other ones were fine, just a combination of a little bit of a dip right on the joint there, and then the actual turnout itself being ever so slightly flexed upward just in there. Again, don't glue turnouts in place, so I hope that this one is going to be okay and that it's not a wider problem with the turnout itself. Some people are probably scoffing at the idea of even putting this in, but I'm pretty confident that it's going to be okay. This turnout also isn't going to be a widely used turnout, so thankfully it's ended up right here. This is the coming into north side of Union Station. This was ironically the turnout that I hadn't been sure if I was going to add. It wasn't originally on the track plan, but I've added it in, so I don't think this is going to get used an awful lot. I'm not too concerned about it, and I think giving the additional support under the sleepers there will work out just fine. Alright, so this is the south side of King Street Station, and so kind of winding in from where it'll come in from the return loop through one set of turnout, another set turnout, another set of turnout, and so now all I have to do is the really long straight sections kind of hanging out behind the drill, and then one turnout right at the end that will bring it in and run off to the tunnel portal to go into downtown Seattle. So none of the track is glued in place. None of the turnouts obviously are glued in place. They do all have the feeder wires. Same with the turnouts. There are every section of track, every length of track has its own set of feeder wires, and the points have their own feeder wires as well. They're not connected in either. They're all just kind of hanging out at the moment too, but slow going. I've been having a really hard time doing this kind of reaching over to be able to get to it, and then it is just a little bit slow going as well. Turnouts aren't too bad. I'm getting those in just fine, but then for some odd reason when I'm coming to solder the feeder wires, I'm setting it so that the static rail is at the back, and then the rail that moves as the track flexes is at the front. So you haven't seen a flex track before, I can try and show it here. You'll have one rail that stays in place, that top rail, and then there's one rail that flexes, and so it kind of slides within the ties along the sleepers. And so the rail that on the rail that flexes, the sleepers melting at times. Sometimes it's fine, and then the far side sleepers no problem, and it's the same sleeper that runs all the way through. So a little bit annoying. So there's a couple of places where some of the sleepers just ever so shorter as they've kind of shrunk. It's not even actually touching the sleepers, it's just the sleepers are just shrinking in a couple of places, but that's not too big of a deal. If it really annoys me, I can always cut them out. I've got plenty of extra sleepers as I'm going through and cutting it out for where the rail joiners are going in, which is why you see. And so if we come down here to where I've got 2 straight sections joining, you can see there's the gap where the sleeves are taken out for the rail joiners to go in. But let's kind of come along a little bit and so you can start to see the geometry of the turnouts. And so having those broad number 10 turnouts, again, it's just kind of pinned in place. The track isn't glued, but get some kind of an idea how it will be very gently flowing to go into the different turnouts into the different platforms. So I'm going to run down and see if I can get the rest of these straight sections done and then turn out in at the end through the tunnel portal, and that might be it, like time wise and just whatever. I might end up just saying, okay, King Street Station is done, because I've got 1, 2, 3 turnouts and then a bunch more straight sections to do Union Station. I think I was being a little bit optimistic that I was going to get a bunch of this track work done. So let's plow on with the strut sections. Really nothing exciting to them. You know, kind of like with the turnouts, all that I'm doing underneath is I don't know how well it will focus, but there are sections where there's either no sleepers underneath, or the joints between the sleepers rather, just because of the way the flextrack works, and so I'm kind of either cutting out one, or I'm just using the ones where there are none, and just soldering it to that so it's underneath, and so then when it's ballasted you won't see them. Not doing it on the side profile of the rail, that doesn't look great. Not doing it on the rail joiners because I don't really trust the rail joiners. So just, yeah, going through doing that, drilling the holes through the foam and then the plywood sub-row bed so that I can then put those feeder wires through. It's all 24 gauge solid wire, and then once I've gone through and done all of these strut sections, then I can start tapping them into that main DCC bus. And hopefully I've got the polarity correct on all the rails. So one thing you do need to remember when you do this is always make sure that it's the same rail that's going to be carrying the polarity positive and negative. So with DCC, I've got blue and white as my bus lines. We kind of come in here, a little bit of a luck. I don't have my light on, but it's blue and white for my DCC bus, black and red for the DC accessory bus. And so my feeder wires are then also blue and white. The frog for the turnouts is green because frog's green. Ribbit, and so the frog feeder wire is green so that can get connected into turnout motor in the future. But otherwise, blue is always the back rail on my layout. Again, you can do whatever you want. I just make it that way so that it's kind of easy to remember. Blue is on the back, blue is on the back, blue is on the back. I don't know if that started in DC layouts where you would often use red and black, and so black was on the back, black was on the back, black was on the back, and so it makes it easy. You just have to remember that you go through and do that and say, okay, blue is on the back, and then when you flip it over to then actually solder underneath, blue is now on the front. So got to kind of keep that in mind. I'm pretty sure I have it all correct through the turnouts, through all these sections of track, but then I'll solder into the DCC bus kind of one or two sections at a time, test it and make sure I'm not going to try and wire up 20 feet of track across 4 different platforms and across 4 turnouts, 5 turnouts, and then find that I have a short. Go in little sections as you go, and then it will make it easier. So I'm going to crack on, get the rest of these long stretch sections done, and then we'll come back and take a look. I don't even remember what the last little video clip was that I recorded. This has been spread out over a number of days now, slowly getting to work on this, but basically all of the track work now for King Street Station is in place, all the way from the north tunnel portal basically. Okay, there's, I don't know, what's that, 6-inch section or so. That will go into the tunnel portal. I'm not going to put a short section in because when we extend out that plywood sub-row bed, then I can just put in 1 to 30-inch flextrack sections. But otherwise, all of the track work is in, all of the turnouts are in, nothing is glued, but everything is set in place, and then there is just those Woodland Scenic foam track pins holding it in place on the curves. Everything is now wired in as well, and as you can see, everything is hardwired in. There's a little bit more exciting one where all 4 tracks coming together, a couple of tracks coming together, more tracks coming together, so everything is hardwired in. Different ways that you can connect into the DCC bus. You can use like suitcase connectors, you can crimp connectors. I've seen people literally just tap in and then use the little twist blocks, completely forgetting what the name is, the little orange and yellow and different color ones depending on the gauge size that you do, the twist connectors. And I think that in a layout like this, that's going to be around for a while. Hardwiring it in is fine. I do have an adjustable soldering iron, and so I can crank it up and get fairly high heat, but might switch over to a solder gun. when I do some more, just because with that 14 gauge solid core, it takes 3 or 4 seconds or more of heating up before it'll actually make a nice clean solder connection rather than a cold and brittle joint. But again, down on this south side, track work all the way through to where it'll then go into the return loop, and so same thing as on the north side. Once the rest of that plywood sub-rod bed goes in place, then I can put another flextrack section in. I don't want to butt it all the way up here and then have a joint right on the top of the plywood sub-rod bed joint. Nothing is glued again on this south side. Those curved sections just kind of held in with the track pins. But it has been cool to run some trends. Hopefully there's been a few little shots of trends moving around just kind of for fun. So that has been kind of cool. It does now give me 4 tracks. I have somewhat moved the track pins out of the way, and then tried moving locos forwards and backwards through the turnouts, running no problem at all. So I didn't mess up the wiring on them. There's no shorts as it goes through, and even this 262 Mikado is able to move through it just fine, forwards and reverse at its slowest speed setting. So quite happy with the operational ability of those turnouts, especially since none of the track work is glued in place around it, and so some of the radius coming off the turnouts isn't held smoothly in place once those pins are out the way so it can go through. But it does kind of prove out that the track work works, that the turnouts work, everything is wired up, and so now I've got the 4 platforms, and I think in total probably at about 80 feet of track. No, that's not right. Yeah, pretty close to 80 feet of track, I guess. I guess because I had extended down and with the curved sections, yeah, something like that, 75, 80 feet of track. And then 5 turnouts, I think, that we have too. So this gives me something to kind of play with. At least for me, I'll be going in for surgery tomorrow, so I wanted to kind of get this done. I don't know when I'll actually get the video done and get it released, but at least now I can run some trends. I can kind of do a little bit of switching. It is kind of cool that because I already have the Digitrack system that's hanging out down there, and USB is then connected into Raspberry Pi and computer monitor that's sitting over there on the workbench, that I do have all this automatically connected in with JMRI. So what I might do is spend some time programming the DCC roster within JMRI, adding in all the locos. Those that I got sound functions, I can go in and name the sound functions on them, so I don't have to remember what F7 does and what F21 does. Through Engine Driver on a smartphone, it'll just tell you what it is. Speed matching as well, so this is the power for the 1957 Empire Builder. So it's F7 ABBA units. These two have the same Digitrax decoders in them. This was a pair that I then bought, used, although it hadn't actually been used, but this has a lock sound decoder in it, and I don't know what this has by way of decoder, but these two pretty much run at the same speed settings because I'd already programmed them such when I first put them in. I did some basic speed step settings on them, but then these don't. So things like that, speed match locos, I've got the same with Milwaukee F7 ABA pair. I've also got North Coast Limited in Lowy scheme. I've got F7 AB unit. So I can do things like speed matching, get the roster build, get some of the sound functions done. So that'll be fun. It'll give me something to play with, and if I can do, I'll do maybe a couple of little videos on the JMRI stuff. But I think progress-wise, this is going to be it for the layout for quite a while. I'm having a real hard time even just lifting my elbow up before I've had surgery. So Union Station will have to come later in the summer, I guess, and King Street Station is going to just stay like this for a while. Not going to try and glue it. That's just, I can just see that ending badly. I need to stop, I need to rest, and I need to just let myself recover. So Hopefully you've enjoyed at least some trains running here in and out of King Street Station in Seattle. It is cool to have, finally made some progress. It's me making progress for you, but finally made some progress, I guess, to the point where I now have track work in place. I have the turnouts down. I can move trains around, especially those ones that are sound equipped. It's very cool, and yeah, I'll be back at some point over the summer, later on in the summer. Please do let me know what you think of the progress so far. Like, subscribe, follow along, hit the notification bell thing so that whenever I am back, whenever I am doing videos, then you'll find out as soon as they get posted. And take care, everyone. Bye bye.